I was so excited to choose Brent because not only is he a former US Olympian, Tour de France winner as part of that team, he just has a tremendous passion for supporting and serving others through his mental performance coaching.
Here we are at Travel Perk today, and we were talking about really the role and synergy of individual work applied to the team. And the concept of today was team first, self second. And that was really a takeaway, a learning and realization from largely my time as a professional cyclist and my athletic career. Cycling is a sport that on its surface is largely individual. One winner crosses the line, you're on the bike by yourself. But what a lot of people who maybe don't follow the sport don't realize is cycling is a hugely team sport. Teamwork that's happening behind the scenes, rooted in team culture and communication. And that's a lot about what we talked about today, was connecting this dynamic of individual work, individual focus, aspiration, accomplishment, with this idea that when we think of the team first, put ourselves second, we're all in a better position to realize our goals, our dreams, our successes, and come away happy.
Brent, I'm so delighted that you've decided to join us at this for this conversation in Travel Perk. It's such a pleasure because we're talking about, and we've spoke a lot about this in the past, about your role as an individual cyclist, right? And most folks here have received an individual rating of I've been a high performer over the past year. And I think we live in a world of very focused on individualism. But today, what we're going to talk about is this concept of team first, self second. Why is this topic so important to you?
I think if my competitive career and my adult life, striving for performance and optimizing performance, taught me anything, it taught me a couple things. One of the most important things it taught me is that this process of optimizing performance, getting the most out of ourselves, it's always better with a team. It's better from an efficiency standpoint. It's better from an enjoyment standpoint. And this idea that we can together accomplish something that none of us really could individually. Not any one person in this room can run the whole show, like captain the whole ship at Travel Perk, reach all the customers. The potential, the extrapolation, and the ripple effect is so much greater with team. And honestly, it's also it's enjoyable too once you get the equation right and find that bit of team magic.
Yeah, and in your career, you've had the both challenge and opportunity of shifting your focus from this race is about me, Brent, to this is about the team. Can you tell us an example of that in your career where you've had to maybe sacrifice individual accolades or accomplishments for the betterment of the team?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is pro cycling in the nutshell. If you're not one of the world class leaders, you are working for the team, and it's something that maybe takes a little getting used to. When we're young, we get results and we win young races, and we arrive to a new level off those results. One of the most defining moments of my career that exemplifies this team first, self second, was in the Tour of Italy, Giro d'Italia, which is taking place right now. They're probably finishing their stage up over in Italy right now. But it was my first ever Grand Tour in the Tour of Italy, and I did a really strong first stage performance in the individual time trial. I was second place overall, only to a soon-to-be Olympic champion in Bradley Wiggins. And what was interesting is I performed better than my team leader, Cadel Evans. And so I went into the next stage, sitting better than our team leader on the overall, but still with the explicit direction and team goal and focus of supporting our leader, Cadel, over the 21 days of racing. It wasn't about getting our individual result in any one day. It was about the best that we could materialize over 21 days. Well, the next day out on the open roads, we were, interestingly enough, in Holland for these first couple of days of this Tour of Italy. Really windy, flat, but wind and bike racing just creates a chaotic just melee of mess. Riders all over the road and crashes are happening. And we're approaching the last few miles of the race, and there's a huge crash that takes out big swath of riders. And I'm through the crash, I'm off in the grass, and I'm back onto the road, and I can see the lead peloton just in front of me, and I'm sprinting onto it, and I can see already, I'm scanning it. There's about 20 or 30 riders. The leader of the race that had won the time trial the day before, Bradley Wiggins, he's not there. So immediately I'm thinking, like, if I get into this group and they don't catch us by the finish, then I'm leading the overall race. You get the coveted pink jersey of the Giro d'Italia for at least one day. And then I hear the crackle over my radio from my team director saying, Cadell's down in the crash. Cadell's caught up. All hands on deck. Everyone's waiting for Cadell. And in that moment, it was a decision, but it was also exemplified our team culture and this focus on really that team first, self second. I didn't really think about it. I thought about it a lot after the fact, but in that moment, I pulled the ripcord, went back, waited for Cadell, and worked my butt off in that group behind, trying to limit the time loss and limit the damage to that front group. And it was really only after the race I realized, like, oh man, what have I done? Did I do the right thing? Should I have taken the pink jersey? This would have been a career defining moment, my first Grand Tour, just to lead it for even one stage. But what I was taught by this example and this lesson was what came from that, that personal sacrifice, that culture that we had built, which created sort of this subconscious automatic decision that went on to pay dividends and create success for us and reinforce and just build a team culture where we were able of accomplishing much more than my one day in the pink jersey at the Giro. The next year we went on to win the Tour de France. And Cadell was the first and still only Australian to ever do that. And that was one small data point along the way, but I feel like it was impactful and influential in terms of, my commitment to the team, also others like seeing that I did that. Cadell also appreciating that. And it really built, that this team went on to be a fairly prolific generational team in the sport. And it was only possible because of that culture and that sort of attitude that we were not just out there for ourselves, but we're working for the team.
Wow. What a story and what a moment. And I don't believe that you didn't think, hey, I'm just going to keep going. No, but it sounds like, yeah, you've talked a lot about the culture there and the automatic response, right? And is muscle memory, and it's sort of, you've already introduced the concept of why, which we're going to dig into, but I just love the fact that it wasn't a hard conversation internally for you. You were very clear on your role, your purpose, your why. And I really hope Cadell was grateful. I'm sure he was, because you obviously worked together then, as you say, and and had you not made that sort of personal sacrifice for the greater good, what do you imagine would have happened? Like if you had went, nah, I'm just going to go ahead here.
It's a good question. I mean, I probably would have gotten paid more the next year, with that personal accolade or result. But at the time, I don't think my team leader, he did know or realize, we were so caught up in just like, how many seconds did I lose? What do we do tomorrow? How do we get this back? But once again, it wasn't about for me receiving the individual praise or appreciation or pat on the back of like, wow, man, like way to go. Like, let's applaud you for this selfless decision you made. It was about staying focused on the task at hand and what are we doing together to stay on track towards this overall team vision, this overall goal. And ultimately it did serve me really well. I went on to be like essentially a franchise player with this team, rode with them for 11 years, which is nearly unheard of in the sport of cycling. And this organization, this performance in 2010 helped us achieve that Tour de France win in 2011. That helped the team to be world time trial champions, which are all these outcomes and results. But that employed individuals, it created livelihoods, it inspired a nation of cyclists in Australia after Cadell won the Tour. So when you think of the ripple effect and the reach, that was the impact of that teamwork and that culture that we built to facilitate that.
Yeah, and we've all been in experiences, I think, even in context of kind of professional workplace, that when you see somebody go out by themselves and do what works for them in the short term, I think you get found out. I think you get found out pretty fast, and uh, you become the person that you don't really want to work with and isn't contributing to the overall success, right? And that's, I think, one of the things we're really trying to focus on today. So, Brent, let's launch into this. I'm curious to hear your take on point number one, which is, find your race. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, find your race is not something I had articulated or really appreciated during my career. It was something that this is a kind of a reflection after the fact of like, oh, I was doing this. But essentially, what I mean by find your race is find something that is really important to you that facilitates you raising your level, lifting yourself up, that then increases your contribution to the overall team and really like brings up the average. So the front of my mind example, the most telling example of find your race from my career, had to do with trying to become an Olympian. I realized in my first few years into my professional career, it was becoming a livelihood. It was becoming a job. There was a lot of performance expectation. There was a business aspect of the team. We're trying to, get results for our sponsors, and we're trying to sell bikes and get impressions. And I quickly started to sort of like lose motivation and lose some of the passion and lose some of my fire. So I had to kind of go back to the drawing board and think, all right, what is something that really means something to me that is going to bring up my level, motivate me, inspire to me, light my fire and keep that fire burning, that will also still allow me to work for my team and achieve these outcomes and metrics that are important to the business of a professional sports organization. And the Olympics were an easy sort of thing to grab. It was like real quick. Oh yeah, this is for me. And the Olympics in cycling, it's not for your trade team. It's not for your professional team. It's for your country. It's for you. It's for my individual support team, my family. And that was a childhood dream. So by strategically going after this Olympic selection, I also basically, raised my level, raised my capability, raised my potential and my impact to the team. So everyone benefited. So
Mm. It's really interesting, and we've talked about this before together about really rooting yourself in knowing why you're in a particular race, understanding what energizes you, because everything's a struggle in life, and I think the struggle becomes easier when you've really been quite intentional. I'm curious from the team perspective. You talked about Cadell and your role in that team, and spanning over a decade. How often did you kind of evaluate whether or not this was the right team, the right race, the right organization, the right culture that you wanted to be in? And again, I'm asking this because oftentimes, for folks here, I'm sure, as well as myself, you can find yourself just on autopilot and kind of just doing the thing and chasing the next, especially for our revenue folks, our next target, our next goal, and quarter to quarter. And we don't always pause to reflect and go, is this where I want to be? Is this the race I want to be in? Did you have a consistent practice of kind of reflecting on this, or how intentional were you?
yeah, I think that process of reflection is something that becomes built into the daily, the monthly, and the yearly. My why with why I was racing, that it changed and evolved over time, and it even changed day to day. So daily, there would be a bit of a my why check-in of like, why is this still important to me today? And some days it was, I just have to complete this workout because the coach is standing there and he's going to cut me off the next squad if I don't complete it. So let's just be real honest, Brent. This is just about just beating the guy next to me. And this is what I have to do today.
That's super honest, right? Because it's not like, oh my goodness, I can't wait to get on the bike today. I'm sure there are times you're going, because I do a little bit of cycling, Brent. Do the odd 30 kilometers, maybe 80 if I'm feeling up to it, but it's sore. It's sore for a long ride. I know you do a little bit more, but yeah, it sounds like in the moment you are sometimes having to dig deep or really understand why you're doing that.
Yeah, and it's not always pretty, it's not always glamorous, and it's not always I'm changing the world and yeah, feeding the hungry and yeah, clothing the naked. Sometimes it's kind of superficial and it's like, yeah, I just need to eat today or I just need to get paid And that's today. But yeah, then after that, I'm going to reevaluate, zoom back out, and recheck in again. And within that, there's a larger sort of like fundamental philosophical why, which I'm not getting caught up in on the daily. That's more of set and predetermined like status checks and progress checks. And I'm also including my personal team and others that help hold me to my values and what's really important at those more comprehensive why philosophy and value checks.
Yeah, I love that. So there's a sense of overall you're going this direction. You don't need to check in on that on the regular. You kind of know this is the why. You've got your personal team, which I love. I just love the question of why is this important to me today? I think that would solve a lot of problems for those of us in those moments of, poor motivation. They're going, what am I doing here? And then to ask myself, why is this important to me today? So thank you for that. I'm happy enough. Let's move on to our second point, because this is also sort of building on the intentionality of finding your race and then committing to the role. Tell us a little bit more about that.
I think one of the main concepts of committing to the role is accepting that it's not about doing everything. It's not about covering all the bases, doing everything in the room. It's about understanding what your role is and then really owning it, doing an exceptional job in your role. So if your role is a teammate, if your role on a bike racing team is to be a climber and to ride up mountains and to be with your leader over the high summits of the Tour de France, throw all your effort into there. Even it might not be where you came from, and might not be what got you there, but in that time, in this place, and with this group, committing to your role means being exceptional at what you're doing and why your team needs you.
I love this, and I'm big into. I've also learned this through sports, and what I've noticed when I've worked with basketball coaches who've been leading teams is the coaches that are really clear with me about this is your role, this is what I expect. I have always found that that's when I perform the best, because the clarity is there, and then I can commit to it. In your experience, and just generally for folks, like, have you had moments where your role was unclear, and how did you go about clarifying that with your leadership?
Yeah,
With your team?
absolutely. I think that is a trademark and a characteristic of strong leadership. It's a clarity, it's a communication, and at times like also a collaboration to define that role, to articulate that role, make sure everyone's on the same page. When I think about being up against that and not having the clarity maybe from externally or from leadership, I go back to thinking like what am I bringing as a person? So this is not the output of what it looks like in the workplace or on the race course. This is what character traits, what strengths, what qualities, what are my like superpowers. Understanding that, doing the work, the self-reflective work, often with the support of others to understand what those are, and then channeling their individual strengths, your qualities into your role, really from the inside out. That also creates confidence. When we talk about letting our confidence sit on top of external results, what we've done, the output of our work, that's shaky ground. There's so many uncontrollables that culminate to create those outputs and those results. But if we focus on confidence from an inside out perspective, and our confidence being built from our character strengths, our qualities, and our character, that those are fundamentals that can't be taken away and authentically bring us to our role.
How have you found it's good because we've moved away from almost the technical, right? I'm a climber, I'm a sprinter, to what are my kind of character traits or my values, your Pokemon card, so to speak. How do you go about helping folks understand those things? How do they know you're a 10 out of 10 in this, and this is what you need, and this is what I'm all about?
Yeah, I think that is part of what I do as a mental performance coach, is help performers, help athletes discover those and like uncover those. Some of it goes back to this first point of like finding your race, what lights your fire, but it's starting maybe with the outcome, like, oh, I was really good speaking to this group of people, or I was really good hammering in the final element of this deadline. But then it's like going deeper and deeper and deeper, asking like, well, why were you good at that? What
That's a great question.
quality do you have that enabled you to do that? Like maybe it was because maybe you were like some of these qualities that you all tossed up on the screen about what is important to teamwork. So like realizing like I was really good at communicating, or like I was an excellent listener, or maybe I was really persistent and tenacious and I just didn't give up, or I was very skilled and capable of being uncomfortable for a very long time and enduring. Those are all examples of these qualities that translate to executing in your role.
Yeah, I love the depth, right? The going beyond just, oh, I'm really good at speaking in front of people. Great. Why? Go deeper and figure out that driving force, that motivation, maybe perhaps where that skill arrived from or that talent arrived from, right? Because I think we're working on these even if we don't realize we're doing it. I was telling you a story about I was a Toastmaster at a wedding recently. A lot of people came up and said, you should do this for a living. Be a Toastmaster at weddings would be amazing. I have one more quick question on this, and then we are going to move into our third point. And it's really about conflict within commitment to role, right? Because what we're talking about is committing to the team first, self second. And in my experience in the workplace, sometimes more often than I would like to admit, there was conflict between what I wanted to bring to a role in a team and what was asked of me. Think back to an experience where, in one of my final roles in my last company, I was working in London, and I was in a role that I didn't really enjoy. It didn't really line up to my skills or my passion or where I felt called to kind of serve. And I remember it was really interesting because my manager, that I thought I'm quite an obvious person. I thought it was so obvious that I was demotivated and uninspired in the role that I was in. And I remember it came to like a career conversation, and I was shocked in the conversation when he did not ask me about what I wanted to do or what I was excited about. He actually just went into the technical. He said, so, hey, here's how we're going to get better at this role. And I spent 30 minutes in the conversation thinking, how is he so oblivious to the fact I don't even want to do this role? And he never asked me the question. I remember there was such conflict, and subsequently I left, obviously. But I remember feeling like I didn't feel comfortable at the time sort of bringing up, hey, I'm not even really interested in this. There's clearly a conflict over where I want to be in terms of my skills and what gives me energy. Have you had experience, like what would you do or have done in that experience where there's been a conflict for you over like what you think you're bringing to the role versus what the team needs or your leader needs?
Yeah, I think that is in some ways it's an inevitable part of this process and evolution as we strive to be high performers. There, the leadership or the powers that be or the environment we're in, they're not always going to be considerate of what we want. It's not always a therapy session. They're not always like just in there taking care of you today. Where how I navigated that often in my career was realizing that, okay, for this role, that is a gap, that there's something missing there that I need to achieve, learn, acquire. So I have my team on the race course, like I have my team at work, but now who do I need? What do I need to build my personal support team that's going to help me fill this gap? So like at the end of the day, yeah, like the role might make me really scratchy and squirmy and uncomfortable, and I don't feel like that's what I want or they're not listening to me. But the reality is that I have this larger vision. I have this deeper why. I'm still going towards that. So let's go back to the drawing board and let's assemble the professionals, the resources, the training that I need to fill that role, build out my personal support team to fill that gap.
Love that. Brent, we could talk all day about this. We like to keep it bite-sized and really digestible. Our third point is around trust and psychological safety, which I know at Travel Perk and broadly in industry now, it's become, sadly, I think it become a bit of a buzzword, right? Psychological safety. But what does this mean to you in practice when it comes to kind of team first, self second?
Yeah, I think trust and psychological safety mean that you are able to show up honestly. You're able to show up with an appreciation and a respect for others. And that ultimately is how we're going to really perform and achieve high performance with integrity, and from that inside out person first way. When I think of trust and psychological safety from my world as a professional cyclist, I think of these team time trial efforts. So if you're not familiar with cycling, the team time trial is when you have your team for that race, maybe 7 or 8 riders, and you all start off on the start ramp at the same time, and you have to finish with at least 5 riders. So the time is taken on the 5th rider. And this is the ultimate example of check your ego at the door. It is the ultimate example of communication, of humility, of vulnerability. It doesn't matter how strong you are. It doesn't matter how good that pull you take is at the front. If you're not listening to your teammates, if you're not considering what your teammates are doing, how your efforts are combining to pull the entire team down the road, the team implodes and falls apart. But as I mentioned, that vulnerability and humility that's needed, that only happens when the team truly is together, trusts each other, and is in that safe environment.
What, in your experience, contributes to creating this trust and psychologically safe environment in a team?
The I can't overstate the role of the leader, really, of the leaders, of whether it's at the very, very top or whether it's, I know all of you here are leaders in some capacity and have your respective teams. The trust and psychological safety is not something that can just be spoken about, taught, written about, whiteboarded. It needs to be lived and exemplified. So it is an example of our actions speaking louder than our words. And using the cycling analogy once again, your teammates aren't gonna feel confident in checking their ego at the door, showing vulnerability, and sitting at the back if they're slowing the pace down or taking the big sacrificial pull at the end, if they've seen their leader and their team director before, like fire someone, like not select them for the next race, like cut their contract, or like verbally shame them across the finish line. There's no way you're getting even close to that if the leaders haven't just like talked about it and appreciated it, but really lived it and exemplified it.
Mm. I'm curious about, other examples of like when there's been conflict. Have you been on teams where people feel comfortable speaking up? I know that's something we just asked this audience of, like, how comfortable are you in challenging? Have you been in great environments in your career where people have done that? And what do you think has contributed to that environment where people can challenge?
Yeah, I think one of the most effective facets of that process of being in and creating an environment where people can challenge is setting deliberate times and opportunities to do that. So actually like starting that process, saying there's going to be an endpoint, creating a safe space to do it, and really being deliberate and doing it by design, not letting it happen by accident. The teams that I was part of that did this really successfully, this was designed in the pre-competitive strategic part of the event, and then also the post-race evaluation and deliberation part. It wasn't just, oh, these guys will talk about it after dinner and they'll figure it out. It was like, no, we are doing this now. From now until 20 minutes from now, this is a safe space. We're coming down. What you say here will not be held against you. We're all saying this in the spirit of moving ourselves forward, building this trust and collaboration. But yeah, having some rails on it and not letting it just happen accidentally.
I love that. Well, it doesn't happen accidentally, I find. I think if it's not by design to build trust, to create psychological safety, if you don't have those mechanisms, especially in a busy workplace culture, like Travel Park or otherwise, it's the thing that gets canned. It's the thing that doesn't get spoken about. And then time goes past and you haven't said the hard thing that if you had have corrected earlier, the team would have been aligned quicker. So thank you for calling that out. Trust and psychological safety by design. So Brent, we're towards the end of our conversation, and the final question I want to ask you is, if we were to adopt all of the different strategies and concepts that you've shared with us around team first, self second, how might the world change for the better?
The world where we put the team first and ourselves second is one that is more enjoyable to be a part of. We're accomplishing things that we cannot accomplish on our own. And it's really it's efficient also. It's there's an efficiency there. There's a masterful like productivity and efficiency where we're all working together and getting the most out of ourselves to accomplish something bigger than we could not alone.
I like the sound of that world. It really aligns, especially with what we talk about in People Playbook: happier, healthier, more productive teams. Brent, this has been an absolute pleasure. I'm so delighted you decided to join us in our Conversations with the High Performer series at Travel Park. Thank you so much for taking the time. Brent Bookwalter, everyone.
Pleasure. Thanks, Tony.